Okay, we're live. Here we are again.
Are we here? Are we in?
We are in. We are in. Let me just see if people are joining the room. Yes, we have 75 people already. 77. Right. It's going up.
All right.
So here we are again, and welcome to the penultimate session. And I'm now here with Scott Rossi, whom I'm sure most of you have heard of.
Trevor, I think, should be the penultimate. But anyway, no worries.
No, Trevor is the ultimate.
Oh, okay. All right, Trevor.
Okay, so Scott is famous throughout the LiveCode community for his amazing and beautiful graphics and his UI design. We all go to Scott's site when we want something really pretty. So I'm looking forward to what he's going to tell us today, and I am going to hand you over to Scott. Oh, Jackie's asking you to turn up your output volume, Scott.
Don't know if I can do that, but let's see. I'll move the mic closer.
Yeah, moving the mic closer will probably help as well. Yeah?
Oh, there. Check 1, 2, test.
Is that better?
2 designers walk into a bar. Can everybody hear me okay?
I think we're okay. All right.
Yeah. You guys got to get your Chromecast audio going or something to, like, you know, turn up the lower end. No, you don't want to do that.
They're not awfully happy about. No, they're saying it's not better. What can we do? What can we do?
Hang on. Let's see. Sound. Input. How's this? Is this any better?
Sounded good to me.
Is this any better? I've got it almost up to, it's like up, I don't know, what is this, 75? I don't know what this is.
Yeah, Skip says it's better. And Jackie is happy.
Is it better?
And Matthias, well, they're all happy. Everybody's happy.
If Jackie's happy, then, you know, that's what matters, right? So, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it was pretty low, so hopefully it's better now.
Okay.
Are we good? All right. I have to apologize. My space here is poorly suited to displaying me, but anyway, yeah. Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm gonna I don't need to say too much about myself, but I'm gonna switch here from my my live feed here, and I'm gonna switch over to the stack. I like to do things in a risky way. Dangerous, but I'm going to do it. That's just the way I like to do things. So let's see. Can everybody see screen? Is like screen showing up here?
Well, I can certainly see it.
Okay.
Wait for confirmation.
Just out of curiosity, does just the main screen show up, or do the palettes and things show up as well?
I'm just
the main screen. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's okay. I'll make references occasionally then to using the inspector, the project browser. So don't worry. It's fine. I really want you to just focus on the main screen. So anyway, this topic is a little bit all over the place. You can see with the title here is graphics and LiveCode, the upcoming future of user interface. That's like way too much stuff to do in this period of time, but it's just stuff I'm interested in. Excuse me. I thought you guys might like to hear a little bit about some things I've been thinking about as well. And first, so we'll be talking in 2 parts. The first part's really going to be the graphics part. And once again, my name's Scott Rossi. I'm a UX designer that's working out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been here for pretty much my whole life. I've been working with LiveCode for roughly 17 years or so. I've been kind of dabbling in it for a long time, and primarily from the interface side of it. And so I'm here to talk about graphic stuff, and also going to touch a little bit on images. And the reason why I'm making this distinction is because over the course of my dealings with the LiveCode community, a lot of people refer to the term graphics to represent anything that gets displayed in a card or in a stack. And so I just want to make sure that we're talking about specifically graphics versus images, and they're 2 completely discrete objects. So when we're talking about graphics, we're talking about vector types of things, which have properties of lines and fills. You have your primitive shapes in LiveCode that have the rectangle, oval, regular polygon, all those types of things, and they have visual properties that can be set by script. You have line size, you have fill, you have gradients, like all these kinds of things. And somebody, let's see, are we having an issue with sound?
No, we're not.
Okay, just checking. Okay.
Had a bit of a loop going on there.
Just checking. Okay. So in any event, let's continue on. I've got my visual aid here since I'm sort of a visual guy and we're looking at a visual presentation. On the left side at the very top here, I've got a polygon graphic that's got a line and a fill gradient applied. At the bottom is an SVG widget that's got an icon displayed there. As these are graphics as opposed to the image on the right, which is a bitmap. I know this is all very rudimentary stuff. I just want to make sure that we're talking about apples and oranges and making sure which is which. You can affect bitmaps. You can actually like rewrite the pixels in bitmaps if you wanted to, but for the most part, they're not quite as editable as something like a graphic. So this is why I'm talking about this. So in terms of user interface and graphics, I've spent a good portion of my LiveCode career building controls, like tons of custom controls, probably hundreds. And I've kind of slowly spent time kind of figuring out ways that work for me. I wouldn't necessarily claim they're best practices, but they're ways that I've found to be pretty effective. And I've been over the years trying to minimize them down kind of further and further and make them more simple. And this is one like kind of simple example of some stuff that I've been working on. So these are, again, very rudimentary controls, but these are all like single object elements that all utilize, for the most part, these are all graphics, except for this one. I'm cheating, which I'll explain in a minute. The checkbox 2 is, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but anyway, the checkbox 2 is sort of a cheat. Anyway, these are all single graphics, and they are designed to behave like standard buttons. They all reference a single button behavior down here that I created to respond to each one of these different types. I created these arbitrary types like ghost button, glass button, circle button, and then there's code in here that distinguishes, okay, what type of button is this, and then respond a certain way. So this button is just setting a fill, like a background fill. This one is replacing the gradient of this graphic with a different gradient that makes it look like it's highlighted. This one inverts the color. This one is a graphic that has an icon font applied to it, which is the font awesome font. And what it's doing is hiding and showing the name. And because the icon font creates the check mark, you only need to use a single element, a graphic element here. And I'm going to show the alternate version of this, which is a field. And this is a field object that has its first character set to a similar icon here. The first character in the field is assigned with a different font than the rest of the field, and the font happens to be an icon font. So by clicking anywhere on the field, it replaces the first character in the field with a different graphic. The radio buttons down here are just graphic objects with a different, again, using the Font Awesome font, using a circle icon applied to each one of these graphics. I should make mention that one thing that some people don't know is that you can actually apply a label to a graphic, even though the label is not a property you can assign in the inspector. You just say set the label of graphic XYZ to whatever, and you'll be able to display text within the graphic the same way that you can in buttons and other objects. It's kind of a useful, I make use of this a lot because I really like the graphic object. It has like a lot of flexibility, and the benefit obviously of using graphics is that you can scale them up and down, resize them at will. You don't lose any resolution. You don't have to worry about, distorted display. They're very flexible type controls. Is that what I wanted? So again, all these things are controlled with a behavior that's down here. These are all single object type controls that respond as, they might be a little bit, more complex than that, but they're not. They're very simple. This control gets a little bit more complex. This is a group of objects. I believe it's a couple of graphics and a button. And my attempt for this was to recreate a material design button. That's what you would see in Chrome and Android. So the idea is it replicates the ripple effect that you see when you press a button in material design. And I don't know how well this comes across on the webinar, but if you, hopefully the green color is radiating out through the button and stopping at the edges. So
it certainly is. It's really pretty.
So the way that this works is there's basically a few graphics in here. The label I think I have set up as a button, and there's an oval graphic that's simply set to expand in place and also fade out as it reaches the edges of the. I'm sorry, when it starts out faded and then slowly increases in color till it fills the control. The circle is actually like way beyond the. Once it's expanded beyond the dimensions of this, but because it's a group, it's constrained within the region of the group. I added a whole bunch of properties you can set here. You can set the radius if you wanted to. You know, this again is controlled by a button behavior that's down here. All these are specifically designed properties that affect the button. So if you want to play around with this, you can. There's an accelerated rendering thing up here. Sometimes in certain cases, you want to have accelerated rendering of a stack enabled or disabled. You know, you have to play around with it to see what your specific use case is. But anyway, it's there. I should make mention, of course, you guys will get a hold of the stack when we're all done. Heather will tell me where to put it somewhere. We'll make it available, and you guys will get a hold of it. So don't worry about that. As far as showing the code, I don't know if it's worth getting into. Well, okay, there's a request. Let's see. I don't know if I don't think you guys can see this if it's in a separate window. Can you? I have the stack editor. I'm sorry, the script editor open, but I have the feeling you can't see it because I'm only sharing the main screen. So let's not worry too much about it. You don't need to worry about it. Just know that the script for this control is contained in this button. If you want to if you want to use this button in your stack, what you need to do is copy the button control, the button group control, and this button into your stack. Assign the behavior of the button group to this button behavior, and you'll be ready to go. So should be straightforward. And I need to let go of this field. Come on, guys.
Yeah, certainly there is a repository for all your stack slides and so forth. If you upload them, I will share it with everyone.
I will do that. I will have everything available, so don't fret, anybody. It'll be fine. All right, so a little bit more uses of graphics, kind of going beyond, you know, we're moving away from single controls now. Obviously, these are multiple controls, but they're just groups. Again, because they're built from graphics, they can be resized and, you know, changed at will. And you know, with some proper scripting, you can actually make them responsive and make them adapt to different, you know, different use cases. If you have a mobile or if you have a desktop type app, you know, lots of different ways to utilize these. In any event, I'm just showing these to show that, you know, you can get some fairly sophisticated and timely looking controls that look, you know, and respond in nice ways. I believe I'm using Multi-Brill's animation engine here to add some of the more organic motion to these controls wherever possible, and having something that moves or animates. I really like to include that that bit of organic kind of feel because it just has a nicer you know, perception and creates for a more, I think, a more kind of high level user experience. So you guys can mess around with these, take a look at the scripts. They're very basic, they're very rudimentary, but just to show, you know, some of the effects and results you can get just with a few graphics on a card. So if we're going to talk about graphics, obviously we got to talk about icons. It's a whole another set of graphic types of display. You know, there's a number of great thing about LiveCode is there's a number of different ways to display icons. We can use images that are either within your stack or external. You can use the SVG widget. You can use polygon graphics. There's the browser widget, and of course the icon fonts, which I made reference to a little while ago. So I'm going to just kind of run through these really quickly and some of the ways that I wind up using them. For those of you that haven't messed around with it too much, LiveCode added an interesting feature to using external images as icons is that by using a naming convention, you can have your stack automatically display different sizes of icons, again, that are stored externally simply by virtue of the name. So you can create different resolution image icons, and by using these tags in the file name. So like you would have, like, you know, ball at ultralow.ping, ball at extralow.ping, et cetera. The default one, you don't need any tag on it. And by virtue of adding these to your file names, LiveCode will automatically resize images and display the proper one based on the size of your stack and resolution and all that. So let's see. I might need to. Can you guys see this separate stack that's opened up? I've launched a separate stack on top of the main. I'm going to guess you can't see.
No, we can't. Sorry.
Can't see it. Let me see.
No.
If I can switch it.
Go out of screen share and come in again and show that one, or?
Yeah, I will do that. See this now? Heather, let me know if and when this comes up.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this stack has just a single, it has a ball image that's here that's referencing an external file, and down here at the bottom there's 5 additional images that are displayed here, and you'll see that as I resize the stack up and down, it's not actually changing the label of the images, it's actually replacing the image simply by virtue of the size of the stack. So by creating all these different resolution images and using those image tags, you can get a responsive UI that changes depending on, you know, size and resolution. So it's pretty flexible. Something to keep in mind. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the main. And Heather, you can let me know when we're back, if you would. I'm back. Okay. Very good. So let's go over to the SVG widget. If you guys have messed around with this at all, again, it's another great way to utilize icons, and that you have a whole slew of icons that the LiveCode guys have provided. I can't show you the toolbar, but it's really simple. You just drag the SVG widget onto your card. And then by using the property inspector, you can assign different icons to it. So what some guys who have been around the block with LiveCode know is that you can you're not limited to just the icons that LiveCode includes. If you know your way a little bit around text files and can edit text files, or code files, I should say, it's possible for you to replace the code of an SVG icon using the property inspector. And unfortunately, I'm not going to jump to it and show it to you, but just trust me. When you select an SVG widget, you get the icon path property that's displayed in the property inspector, and it's basically just a lot of kind of code-based points that describe and define the icon that's displayed in the SVG, right? So thinking ahead, I tried to make it so that I could display the code of an external SVG file that I just grabbed online. You guys can see this. There's some header information. It's really just a text file. And then if you look carefully, you don't have to read this. There's some path information. And when I go down and I find this, like, path D equals whatever, I'm actually going to go in and I'm just going to copy this text. And I'm going to select to the very end of this block, and I'm going to do copy. I believe this will work. And then I'll close the text there. I'm going to select the SVG widget, and now you're not going to see this, but just trust me, I'm doing this. I'm going to go over to the property inspector, and I'm going to replace the code with the code I just copied, and we're going to get a new icon that's not included with LiveCode, right? This is just like a external SVG file I just grabbed, right? So it's fairly flexible. You can do some interesting things with it. As long as your graphic or icon is a single path element, which can actually be composed of multiple paths, but as long as they're a compound shape, it should display accurately in LiveCode. So it's fairly flexible in what you can do. I also want to make mention that whereas the default SVG widget is limited with a single color, if you do a search in the LiveCode forums for SVG, you'll find a thread that talks about, as far as I know, it's still experimental, but there's kind of a multicolor, I believe it might be multi-layer type of widget for displaying SVGs, more complex SVGs. So take a look in there. You guys will find it if you do a search in SVG. I don't know what state it's in. I haven't taken the time to install it, but it does look really promising in terms of displaying more complex SVG files. This last method I'm going to talk about really briefly is obviously it's just using the browser widget, because this might be a little overkill in some cases, but when you want to display a really complex SVG graphic, the browser is pretty much the way to go. It's very robust in terms of what it can display. Again, because this is an SVG. I can scale this up and down with zero loss in quality. It renders perfectly regardless of size. There's no issue with resolution or whatever. It's a really good format, and depending on how the SVG is created, it can be really very detailed and lots of dimension to it. So kind of an interesting or an alternate way, I should say, to display your SVG content. So the last option I'm going to show is for displaying graphics in LiveCode is using an icon font. So here again, I'm going back to the Font Awesome font. So these are sometimes called glyph fonts. And if you go to the Font Awesome site, I've just grabbed like a capture of some of the font, some of the characters that they offer in the font. And what you have to realize about an icon font is it's still based on characters, except the characters use a higher range in the font than standard ABC characters, standard Roman characters. They basically use like a range that's geared more toward Unicode use. And what I've done here is by listing these few, if I look at the code, actually the Font Awesome author lists these, so it's really easy to see like which character is generated by which code. So for example, I'm going to grab let's say the Apple one. It's F179. I'm going to put that in the field here and assign the character. And so this button control here has the Font Awesome font assigned to it. It has a character, this character assigned as the label of the button. And so I'm just replacing the label of the button, but because I'm using an icon font, you're seeing an icon, not a text character. So can be really useful for displaying. You have like a font, you can have hundreds, if not thousands of icons in it, all at your disposal from a single file, which is actually really nice, depending on what your needs are. So that's a pretty nice way to deal with graphics in LiveCode. And of course, completely resizable. You can scale this up and down. You'll have to do some manual resizing on your own because it's a text character, but you'll figure it out. One thing I was going to do is that in some of the past work I've been doing, I wound up having a need to use these icons pretty significantly. So I wound up creating a library for some of the tools that I had made available, and I'm gonna just hand this out today. It's an icon library where I've already gone and set up. I think about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 icon fonts that are already set up either with they're either freely available icons or icons that I've arranged agreements with the authors. And so I'll make this available to you guys today. And I'm going to launch this. And you can see, I'm not going to go through the process of dragging it to my stack. And I'm going to switch here. Oh, it's a palette. It might not let me share it. Okay. No worries. Curse you. Okay. No worries.
Oops.
Wait. LiveCode is magic, so I can set the style of the stack to top level.
We have a couple of questions coming in the chat here.
Let's
Yep. Oh, that looks like something different there.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a list. This is a listing of all the icons that are contained. I've tried to go through and map out all the icons, and the way that this works is that you can flip cards here. You can get access to these different libraries of different fonts, and because we're limited to a single screen here, what's going to happen is I'm just going to, if I grab this icon, I just drag it into my stack, and the font will get loaded temporarily on your system if you don't have it loaded. A button will get transferred to your stack that contains the icon, so you can use it wherever you want to. So it'll be available. You know, we don't have to get too deep into it at this point, but just know that it's going to be available, and you guys can mess around with it at will as you want. So I'm going to switch this back here. Stop sharing. Application window.
Okay, before you get stuck in, let me just give you a couple of questions that have come up in the...
You know, is it, let's see, you know, I'm actually going to have a stopping point pretty soon. So can we just hold the questions? We're almost done with this section. And so I'm happy to answer a few questions. So let's just get to the end of this part, and then I'll be happy to take a few questions. Just to kind of wrap up on this, a number of resources, icon resources you guys can take advantage of if you want. Font Awesome, obviously, that's the, you know, it's kind of like the default go-to for icon fonts. I highly recommend the nounproject.com if you guys have never seen that. It's a repository for tens of thousands of icons that you can search on by name. And they're all available as both PNG and SVG. I believe they ask you to join and maybe pay like a modest yearly fee if you want to download the SVG files. The PNG images, I think, are downloadable freely. This thing is amazing purely from the search standpoint, because you can search any topic, any subject matter, and it'll almost always find results for the icon. So it's pretty cool. Flat Icon is a nice repository of icon sets, groups of icons, which is pretty key. Usually when you create an app, you don't want to have just one icon from here, one icon from there. You want to have a set that all looks like they belong together. So really good repository for this. And lastly, if you're familiar with ICO Moon or ICO Moon, if you want to design your own icon font, you can take your own vector graphics, upload them to the site, organize them, and you can download your own icon font and use it in your stack. So it's really cool for doing that. There's probably about, I don't know, a good 4 to 6 sites online that will let you do this, but ICO Moon is very useful. Oh, and the last thing I'm gonna demo here. I meant to do a blog post about this, but I figure I'll just show it here. Some folks might have heard me make mention before of a site called vector.com, VECTR.com. And what they provide is a vector-based editing tool that not only runs in the desktop, but it also runs in a browser. So what I've done here is I've set up a web browser and linked it to vector.com. And now by doing this, I have an entire vector editing suite, like displaying it right in my stack here. So I'm going to drag out these shapes. I'm going to draw them in the window. It's got, you know, all the standard controls you'd need for creating nice graphics. It's got, you know, rotation. It's got everything that you would want. Now, obviously, the limitation is if you want to save any of your work and access it later, you got to have an account, and the accounts are free, but you got to have an account on vector.com. But it's pretty cool in terms of being able to have an editing environment like superimposed in your LiveCode stack. I just think this is kind of fun. So anyway, that's why I'm showing this. Kind of fun stuff. I'm going to make really quick mention about gradients, because gradients are, if you're doing any type of work in designing mobile applications, it's very kind of trendy, current trend right now, to use gradient colors in designing mobile applications. And the common process is really to use like a background gradient and to have all your foreground elements displayed in white or a really light color. So here are a couple of examples of this. Here are some more examples, and again, you can see the main characteristics and the character and feel of the app is communicated by the gradient, and then the icons and the text, you know, supplement that and are designed to contrast with the background so that everything's legible, readable, and makes a nice presentation. Here's an alternate means of employing gradients, where the gradients are assigned to the data. So you're seeing that the background and everything for the most part is flat, but the data in both the grid or the graph and the radial controls underneath are all filled with gradients. And here's one that goes like way over the top. This is like gradients applied to everything. This is gradient overkill, but still it's worth noting because, you know, there are some UI design and interface design that go this direction, and it really makes for an interesting and very rich type of presentation. Gradients are used everywhere except in the labels and numeric displays, and you know, it as long as you have contrast there, it makes for a really rich user experience. So just to make life easier, I put together a bunch of gradient combinations that I found in a sample somewhere. These are all just graphics. They have a fill gradient applied. If you want to use these in your stack, you just select one, copy it to your stack, resize it to what you want. Here's a tip for when you're working with a graphic or any type of control that's in the background of your stack. If you set two properties of it, which are the disabled and the can't select property of that object, you'll be able to drag select other controls that sit on top of it without worrying about selecting the background object. So you take your graphic, you put it on your stack, you set its can't select and you set its disabled to true, and you'll be able to drag and select and move all kinds of other controls on top of it. You don't have to worry about, like, you know, selecting the graphic by mistake. So something to keep in mind as a tip. Really quick, I know some people struggle with gradients sometimes and trying to work with the, you know, positioning of it. And if you've ever done this, I'm going to bring up the inspector here, and I know you can't see this, but just bear with me. So if I select a color, you can see the gradient handles here are how you affect the orientation of the gradient from the start color and end color and how it responds. But it's a little tricky to align it, right? It's always like kind of a pain in the butt. It's like, oh, I want this to be up here, but I don't have this angle right. And how do I make this thing work? You know, it's too much work. So, you know, here's a really simple tip. There are 3 properties you can adjust by script to straighten out the gradient and just make it perfect the way you want it to, right? So, if you want vertical orientation, I've just listed the 3 properties here. It's basically fill gradient from, via, and to. And if you set each one of these properties to the position that I've identified here, you'll get a perfectly filled gradient. So you select top left for from, you assign top right to via, and you assign bottom left to to, and you know the gradient is instantly fit to the dimensions of the graphic. It starts at the very top, goes to the very bottom, is perfectly vertical. If you use this orientation of bottom left, and bottom right, then you get a horizontal gradient. And again, it's perfectly fit to the graphic. So just remember these 3 properties of the gradient, and you can instantly assign it. You know, get it the way you want to be oriented properly. Some more resources, again, you guys can take care of. Don't worry about, you know, noting these. You'll get the stack. You'll be able to access them. Highly recommend uigradients.com. These guys take their entire web page and spread a gradient across it. So you can get a really nice feel for what a gradient will look like in a large format space. For example, if it's the background of an application, you can get a really nice sense of it. And it's basically, you just flip through screens and it does the entire page with a gradient. It's really nice. Really nice preview. So that's been kind of a mouthful. Let's do a couple of quick questions. I still have a lot of material to jump into with regards to kind of future interface stuff, but I'm happy to take a few questions now.
Okay, Scott. Well, I think we had quite a few coming up here. Reading from top. So Devin had an interesting question here. Does Scott or anyone know how to display icons in a navbar widget that are not font awesome icons?
That's a good question. I haven't messed around with the navbar recently. My guess is if it uses the same UI mechanism to assign icons, it would allow you to do that. My guess is if it doesn't, you might try and check to see if the icon path property can be assigned to each one of the icon elements displayed in there, but that's just a guess. Again, I haven't looked at it, sorry.
Okay. Going down. So Ralph asked, will that work in Windows IDE? But I'm not sure when he asked it.
I'm sorry, for what in the Windows IDE?
Well, he just said, will that work in Windows IDE? But I don't know what he was asking about.
Okay.
So
Well, we can come back to that later. Hopefully we'll have a little time at the end.
Willie's asking for a URL for vector drawing in browser.
Oh, it's vector.com, vectr.com. And it's great because you can download it desktop and you can also run it in a browser. And it's, you can, if you have an account, you can access it everywhere. So it's really cool. I love it. I think those guys are cool.
Okay, now there was definitely a question down here. Yes, how Clarence was asking quite a bit earlier. How do you access the fonts in the IDE?
Oh, by using icon fonts again. If you have them loaded on your system, you need to. So there's two ways you can do this. I'm not going to get into the details, but one is you can either just load a font on your system the normal way you do it, whether you use a font manager or whether you drag it into the fonts folder. The second way is to make use of it temporarily in LiveCode, in that you can say start using font XYZ and the font will be available to LiveCode. It won't be available on the rest of your system because you've just enabled it through LiveCode, but it will be available in all your stacks.
And Jonathan asked, doesn't the user have to have the font installed for icon fonts to work?
Yes, and yeah, as hopefully that explanation I just gave explains that. You either need to have it on your system or you need to launch it from LiveCode. And if you're distributing a stack, you can either take the kind of nice, friendly approach and say, tell the user, hey, I want to install some resources for the application, or just do it. Or you can temporarily load your fonts when the application is running. You can just make use of, for example, the temp name and put stuff in the temp directory and load your fonts there. So there's a number of different ways you can do it. But yes, your icon fonts need to be resident on the destination system.
I think that's everything. I don't see anything more for the moment. So if you want to tell us all about the future of the user interface.
Yeah.
Well, so I anticipated your title. Look at that.
Heather, you stole my thunder. No, just kidding. Yeah, we're for me, I do UI design work kind of day in and day out, or at least something related to it. I've been involved with it for years, so I just kind of naturally follow directions in it, and so it's something that interests me, and I'm always curious about, just interaction in general and behavior, user interface. So I thought it might be worthwhile to look at some of the new stuff. Unless you're a UI person, you may not be familiar with some of the latest things that are happening in interface development. So first of all, I'm going to start with Google's UI system that they're developing that's called Armadillo. And Armadillo is part of the user interface of Google's experimental mobile OS, which is named Fuchsia. And Fuchsia should not be confused with Magenta, which is Google's research project to advance the state of the art of music, video, image, and text generation. So they've got a number of projects going on, but the important thing to note is that Fuchsia, Google is being very mysterious about this, but it's being identified as the operating system to eventually, potentially replace Android and Chrome. And some enterprising people have taken the public repositories on Git. I believe that's where Google made stuff available, and they've actually compiled stuff and done some screenshots and videos of things running. So I'm not going to claim that I'm 100% up to the minute, up to date on what the latest development is here. I'm just showing some stuff that's been posted around the web. But what Google has been doing within the UI is doing these very kind of broad, nothing really well defined, just kind of hinting at what's going to be coming, and you can bet that all this stuff is just changing constantly. In any event, some screenshots here that are taken from Armadillo. There's on the very left side, these are all mobile screenshots. On the left side, there's sort of an identity thing that's displayed in the center, which what is called some story cards above it. If you click on the identity, you have some system settings that get displayed here on the right. When you move to a tablet view, there's like some orientation of these story cards that maybe float around a centrally selected object. And again, you have to understand that these developments have been found by people who have gone and explored this. There's not really any like official documentation like, yes, this is how it's going to work. It's all developmental. It's all experimental. So by viewing the cards on the left, the way that it's been described is you click on a card from a list, and then the action, then the UI expands to take over the screen based on the card you selected. Google has described the way that this works, or describe the use of stories. The README describes stories as a set of apps or modules that work together for the user to achieve a goal. It's pretty broad, but I mean, that's the way that they're describing what these things are supposed to represent. And it's probably worth noting too that Google's documentation has stated, this is something they've officially stated, that it targets modern phones and modern personal computers with fast processors, non-trivial amounts of RAM with arbitrary peripherals doing open-ended computation. Wow. I don't know what that means in terms of hardware, but it sounds pretty demanding. And it might have to be, because here, Google's doing a lot of stuff with dimensionality, drop shadows, probably some Z-axis stuff where things are moving in and out of the screen. They're doing some layering, translucency, a lot of the stuff that we've seen before. But you can get a sense of they're trying to play with this, recreating a lot of user experience that we've come to expect and be familiar with today, but with a brand new operating system. On a tablet view, they're showing how things work. You can get side-by-side applications, showing another variation of this, doing stacked application windows, almost along the lines of like a masonry type of display in a web page. So this different type of orientation. It looks like they're even messing around with tab displays. So that might be something that's going to be coming to the next Google's next OS. And then a really quick, again, very developmental, but showing screenshots of what they're doing with on-screen keyboard and perhaps how this interacts. If you look online, you can probably find a video or two that people have shown, because you don't really get a sense of the behavior and interaction by looking at static screenshots, right? You want to see the thing actually move, and you can bet, because Google has pioneered this material design, they're going to be applying a lot of those principles to Armadillo. All right. Jumping over to Microsoft. Microsoft, in turn, has also been doing a lot of development in next generation interface, and they've publicly announced that they're sort of ending the Windows kind of development naming stuff at Windows 10, and they're going to be constantly updating it with features and behaviors and all that type of interaction stuff, and they call it Fluent Design. At their build conference, they described it as their process is unlocking everyone's creativity by enabling immersive and multi-dimensional experiences that adapt and respond to multiple device and input types. Okay, that's another mouthful. These guys are doing really heavy thinking about how people are going to interact with devices in the future. Microsoft has laid out how Fluent is going to work, and it's going to be based on these 5 major properties of light, depth, motion, material, and scale. And the reason that they're trying to identify like the key components that are going to define UI as they move forward. They've released a few screenshots, which again, you kind of have to take these with a grain of salt because it's all developmental. But in this particular shot, you can see a calendar, a calculator, clock, weather display, all these things kind of, hovering in space with, dimensional background. We can assume that maybe maybe next generations of Windows are going to kind of play with space more and play with dimensionality. Microsoft, or even I think maybe reviewers, I can't remember where I grabbed this quote from, but they say modalities for input have also changed. No longer is touch or a keyboard and mouse the only game in town. Now surface dials, pan gestures, gaze, even presence are part of the system. A new way to build apps that can meet all those requirements had to be created. And so probably a lot of Google's been experimenting with VR, AR, HoloLens, all that kind of stuff, and they're trying to figure out a way to encompass all these different technologies with a universal UI. One product that they're out with now, which you may or may not have seen, is the Surface Studio. It's basically this large format screen, touch screen, that can be tilted up and down, can be tilted up as a normal display, can be tilted down to be used almost like a drafting table. And if you look at the peripherals they provide, they have mouse and keyboard, but if you look at the left, they also have a stylus and what they call a dial. And the dial, you actually physically set on the screen, and depending on the application that you're using, it brings up a contextual kind of menu and interface that allows you to control stuff that's happening on the screen. Here's another shot of that, and you can see that by virtue of using this particular piece of hardware that they're proposing a really two-handed method of doing interaction with the machine as a normal way of work, right? It's not just a little bit of one or the other. It's really like getting in there in two hands, two-fisted working interaction with the system. So I'm going to get into the properties really quick. When they talk about light, I mean, this is listed as grabbing users' attention, but there's a guy, tech writer on NextWeb by the name of Napier Lopez. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's kind of gone into a little bit more depth, or maybe repeated what Microsoft mentioned at the Build conference, and basically how they look at these different properties that they're applying to Fluent. So light is supposed to add an element of illumination to apps. It's particularly useful for mixed reality, in which illuminating where you're going serves as a pointer and helps separate UI elements from virtual environments. So Microsoft is clearly thinking about the combination of standard desktop environment, but also virtual and most likely AR type, mixed reality types environments as well. The next property is depth, and I apologize that the screen capture here is a little bit small, but if you look closely at it, you can see that there's some perspective depth, there's some blurring taking place, there's some fading taking place. One can assume that they're looking at doing, they're looking at implementing Z-axis movement around an interface. So you can sort of zoom in and zoom out of it, and different things come into focus and go out of focus. And again, according to Microsoft, the Z-axis information for the UI, they want to use it for things like parallax effects, mixed virtual experiences. They want to establish the relationship between UI elements, adding some polished animations, and also increasing the sense of space in the app. So that's where they're going with this this property in their UI. One could assume that they're going to follow on the heels of motion and meaningful animation that's been used in material design that Google has done. And for sure, Microsoft is going to pick up on these same cues and look at imbuing transitions between screens and transitions between objects with animation. I think they might use it in connected animation or connected motion, I'm not sure, but they say they want to add animation that interconnects you as you navigate through an app's UI. They want to establish continuity as you move between pages, selections, and tasks. And in my opinion, I think the goal for that in material design is very successful, because rather than having abrupt changes from jumping from one screen to another, you actually use a transition and you give a sense to the user of where they're going, where they've been, and you lead them through the use of the UI rather than just jumping immediately from one spot to another. A really big one in Fluent is the use of material. And whereas Google and material design was using paper, Microsoft is using what they call acrylic. And so their plan is to use this kind of plasticky type of look. They describe that material is going to be a big use in Fluent, and it's going to dictate how the UI can bend, stretch, bounce, shatter, and glide as you interact with the elements. And it's likely going to play a greater role as mixed reality becomes prominent in their user experience. They've posted a few views of some of the different variations of the acrylic property and how these can be applied. So it's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward. And then the last property is scale. They haven't said too much about this other than that it's going to affect how apps reshape and present themselves across different devices. And I have to take issue with this, where this screen came from. At the very bottom, it says from 0D to 3D. I don't know how it's physically possible to have a zero-dimensional interface, but I would love to see how that looks. And I can't wait to see how Microsoft is going to implement that. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Features and characteristics, this revealing highlight, the acrylic material I just discussed, connected animations, which one could assume that's like the meaningful animation when you're transitioning between screens and such. They have conscious controls, which again, they haven't defined, at least as far as I know, too much of what these are, but my understanding is that as you move from device to device, content can resize itself, but also change what it actually displays to the user. So depending on if you're on a TV versus if you're on a desktop versus you're on a mobile phone, the interface will resize, but also potentially change content and interact with its surrounding control elements differently. And then they're also talking about perspective parallax and bringing that into sort of Z-index interaction within the app. My own take on this, I thought, I really find this stuff interesting, and I kind of see this as, in terms of user interface and user experience, the pendulum is swinging back, right? For the longest time, the last like 5 to 8 years, we've been, Microsoft really started it with their Metro thing and doing this ultra flat, zero dimensional type interface. iOS 7 and beyond went very flat. Mac OS 10 Yosemite introduced this really flat stuff. And now a few years later, Microsoft is introducing Fluent. We've had material design from Google about 3 years ago. They started bringing back dimensionality, right? They're having drop shadows, we're having translucency, and we're having depth. And this is all from the previous time where the pendulum started, which is very skeuomorphic interfaces, right? Where you had Vista and Aeroglass, you have OS 10, where remember Steve Jobs called it lickable, right? Everything was very glossy, shiny, dimensional. And everything in iOS 6 and earlier was very dimensional. And we had those goofy stitched interfaces, just all kinds of crazy, paper textures and stuff. So you can kind of see where all this stuff is headed. It's sort of, the pendulum seems to be going back toward that direction. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out over the next couple of years, because there's a lot of new development and new thinking going on, especially with new technologies in terms of experience in AR, VR, blended reality, mixed reality, and how all this stuff is going to come together. It's really an interesting time to be involved in the user experience and user interface realm. So anyway, I guess I'd leave you with a closing thought, is that as you're developing your apps and you're developing your programs and whatnot in LiveCode, that it behooves you to pay attention to developments in these areas, because as these technologies become more adopted and become more widespread, people are going to start expecting them in the apps that they interact with, right? So we as LiveCode developers need to pay attention to this and start thinking about, how can we bring these characteristics into our apps? How can we make the user experience keep up with what these really big, tech companies are providing us? So I think that's going to close out. I think I'm finishing like just on time here. We have a chance to take a few more questions. Hopefully I'm still here. I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming I'm still connected. So Heather, if there's anything else that's come up, feel free to pass it along. But otherwise we can wrap it up.
Following you closely. We've been enthralled, Scott.
Great.
So Matthias has a great question here. I like this question, Matthias. Any chance we'll see a TM Control 3 in the near future from you?
I guess I'll say it's not out of the realm of possibility. I've been kind of waiting for some stuff to happen with LiveCode. Some kind of I have my personal wish list. So I'm really, really briefly, I think one of the things I'll share is that maybe two things. Kind of ease of creating controls is kind of a big thing for me. There's a lot of detail to get into there, but also I'm just dying for better animation support, because I think everything is moving in a direction where just kind of abrupt cuts between transitions and screens and controls is just not going to be. It's going to look a little primitive. The things are going to be a lot more fluent and a lot more motion oriented as interfaces and devices become more powerful. So I think these are characteristics that I would really love to see in LiveCode. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, we're listening closely.
Great.
So yes, what else do we have? We've got a lot of people seconding and thirding that question. So you might want to give it some thought.
I'll give it some thought. It's a lot of work, guys. I mean, I'm just being flat out honest with you. It's a ton of work, and it's a lot of bending over backwards to make stuff do what I want it to do. So it's a tremendous amount of time, and but I get it. I get what you're saying.
All right. So Herman is saying, what is your opinion about the progress of WebGL?
I can't offer a specific opinion on that, other than I know for some things it's become an integrated part of user experience. I'm trying to remember if I'm out of my element here. I don't do any work with WebGL myself, so I may be misstating this. But there's a JavaScript library, 3JS, and I don't know if that takes advantage of WebGL or not. I could be totally mistaken, but in the demonstrations I've seen in that, I think there's some really amazing stuff going on with with that type of 3D display. If it's not using WebGL, maybe maybe I'm wrong, but it definitely has its place. I just don't know specifically, where it's being implemented these days. So I'm sorry, I can't respond to that.
Okay. And Don has asked, what about mixed UI and voice recognition mashups?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I know there's somebody. I know there was somebody on the list who did way back when. What was it? I think like Google introduced. Oh, I'm sorry, I take that back. There have been a number of third-party JavaScript implementations of voice recognition, and the problem is, from what I've seen, they rely on specific browser behavior and browser kind of framework, so that using it within LiveCode is not a possibility. Now, I think if I recall correctly, there was one or two people who have been doing some voice control experiments in LiveCode. I don't know if you have to look on the mail list or maybe look in the forums, but I think somebody's been doing that. The interesting thing is that I'm not really sure how we can take advantage of this, but Google recently came out with a cardboard version of their assistant, right? It's sort of like a voice recognition type little box that you can assemble. I think it uses Raspberry Pi. It uses a second, I can't remember, like another controller. You put it all in a little cardboard box with a button and a speaker, and you have an assistant like right there, and you can do stuff with it. So given that there have been some developments with LiveCode for running on Raspberry Pi, I don't know, maybe there's some opportunity there to make some kind of connection. In terms of like mixed reality stuff, I'm really excited about the latest developments that Apple announced at WWDC recently with their augmented reality reality kit. I'm dying to try to mess around with that. I don't know if I have the technical expertise to do it, but the stuff that they showed for that is really compelling. Not so much in the specific, the graphics that were demoed, but the potential for interaction with environment, because they didn't just show things, kind of superimposed on a table. They showed things that were drawn in perspective relative to the object that they were sitting on, which I thought was pretty cool. I may be overstating the capability of the technology. I know it's kind of first implementation, but I'm totally stoked to see what's going to be possible with that. And hey, I'll ask you, Heather, if Apple has an AR kit, are we going to see some access to that in an upcoming version of LiveCode?
I am going to back that question right back at Mark Waddingham and Kevin, and by all means, go and ask it in the general channel in the Slack,
Sure.
now, where I'm sure people are waiting to pounce on you.
Yes.
So, yes.
All right.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have to move on now because we are about to have Trevor winding up the day.
Woohoo, Trevor. Go, Trevor.
Thank you very much. That was a beautiful presentation, very thought-provoking.
You're welcome. Happy to be here. Thanks,
great.
everyone.
It was great. All right. I'm going to end this session, guys. Be ready to rejoin again. Bye for now.
Bye all.